I want to encourage people who are following along to put questions in the chat. Guillaume, so many of your images, the one that we're showing right now, but so many of your images are showing development basically encroaching on wildlife habitats. That's one thing that you're documenting. And you've made the point that in Europe, in the United States, in other parts of the developed world, our wildlife is essentially now in zoos. We have paved over places where wildlife used to roam. Is your argument is not that Africa ought to stay undeveloped, that development is a bad thing for Africa. I know your argument isn't that. How do you see that conflict between more and more urban sprawl and wildlife?
I mean, the problem is progress is associated to destruction. And what I'm trying to advocate is that there is surely another way. I mean, we are intelligent beings, and as you said very rightly, everybody is allowed development. But can we not find a way where, with more empathy and more respect, and in a position of listening to the people who know better than us, and for us to bring development, but in the different way? It's very simple. It's like urban planning. There's no urban planning at this point in Africa related to the issues that we're talking about. I'm not even talking about urban planning, in cities. I'm talking about urban planning as the cities are growing. But there's a total disconnect. So it's as if the problem didn't exist. So what I'm advocating is like, let's bring development to people, but in a different way than the way it has been right now. Because what's happening is basically progress advances very, very, very rapidly and destroys everything, in its wake.
We have a question here from Michelle Levick. And Michelle writes, I just spent time in Tanzania, returned on Sunday. I saw inspiring work in Grumeti that seemed sustainable and beneficial to all concerned. What are your thoughts, if any? Do you know that area? And what do you say to someone who has been been on a safari and has seen something that does seem to be working?
Yeah, I mean, all those lodges that we go to, and I haven't been to in this area for a very long time, so I'm not really sure what's happening at this moment that we're talking. But
Yeah.
everybody claims to be eco lodge, eco this, eco. And everybody is playing that game because that's the way you get tourists, right? So the only thing that I'm sharing here is a life experience of being in an area and in many countries on the continent, and I'm trying to bring that to light. What I've seen with my own eyes is the unmonitored dwellings that I was talking about earlier. That sometimes you have to go through them to go to another area to be able to enter a reserve or national park, and the people around me who don't have that sort of laser eyes that I have would actually enjoy those unmonitored dwellings, which I don't call, I call them unmonitored dwellings, but they're actually shanty towns growing around national parks. But for an untrained eye coming from New York or Paris, they look very exotic, because they are, I suppose. But for me, they should not be there. It's as simple as that. So it's very hard to answer a question like this because I haven't been exactly where that person was, but I would know immediately if I was there if what this lodge or what this area is selling, so to speak, is working or not.
Yeah, yeah. And so others, feel free to send your questions in for Guillaume. Guillaume, you don't think that ivory poachers are the biggest, and we're showing some images here that you've taken, are the biggest problem facing wildlife. Definitely a problem, but not the biggest problem. Explain why you make that assertion.
So Of course, poaching is a problem. You have two sorts of poaching. You have ivory poaching and rhino poaching, and you have game meat poaching. So let's to answer your question about ivory poaching and rhino poaching, because it's the same thing really. What's happening with that is it comes in waves. There is crisis of poachers and poaching, and then it goes down because it goes, people get organized, and then it's handled in a way that the poaching goes down. Right now, there's no crisis of poaching. It doesn't mean that poaching doesn't exist and elephants are not being killed by poachers, but right now it's not a crisis. And I'll give you an example of how things have shifted. 10 years ago, in some areas, you would find 100 carcasses of elephants, and the ivory was gone. Today, in the same area, you would find 100 carcasses and sometimes more, where you will actually see that the ivory hasn't been removed.
Mhm.
So the difference being that it's no longer poaching that we're talking about, it's human-wildlife conflict. So it's direct conflict for the same resources between humans and wildlife. And I'll explain more. Basically, when I was talking about the surrounding areas in national park or reserves, those areas used to belong to wildlife because there was nobody there, right? Those areas now are totally full with people. So the elephants, if you're an elephant or if you're a lion, so you go out, you chase a gazelle, and you end up basically being surrounded by human dwellings. And if you're a lion, you're gonna go to a farm where you're gonna go and kill a goat. And if you're an elephant, you're going to go to another farm where, a gentleman or a family is growing, salads or lettuce or carrots, and you're going to trample that farm, sometimes kill family members. And basically what happens is people take it upon themselves to go and kill that animal. So that's where we are today. It's animals and humans are fighting for the same resources, and animals are now going back to the areas where they've always gone back, but it's no longer wild. It's full of people.
Mhm. Mhm. We have
Oh,
another
and
question.
I'll just add one more thing.
Yeah,
It's
please.
also related to poaching. It's an easier way to raise money. It's easier to raise money on the bad poachers that are killing wildlife in Africa. And that's kind of the preconceived ideas that everybody has when you start a conversation and you say, oh, I'm doing a book about conservation in Africa. And you say, oh my God, the poaching is terrible. And that's what the idea is, because a lot of the usual suspect basically come to America or the West and will raise tons of money on the fact that they will use that money to fight the poaching. And poaching is a problem, but it's a small problem if you put it in comparison with the wild landscape being taken over by people, and it's totally unmonitored.
Mhm. Mhm. We have a question here from William Holstein, who writes, governments in the region don't have the greatest reputations. Are they doing the right thing? So why don't there's a lot of different governments here. You've traveled to a lot of countries. Are there countries that are better than others in handling wildlife? And is corruption a big part of the
Yeah.
problem here?
Yeah, corruption is definitely a problem. I mean, so there's one way of dealing with this is to realize the disconnect between government and their own problems on the ground. Typically, what happens is you have international experts who come to Africa, go and see the government and say, we have tons of money and we are experts. So why don't we do it for you? And obviously, if you come to anybody, and including a government, and you say that to them, they'll say, "Yes, please take that problem out of our hands." And that's basically where the first disconnect happen. So, and that's where people on the ground don't have a voice, is because the people who are handling and managing the system are people who claim to be experts, but they're not even from there. So that's one thing. The second thing is Yes, corruption is a big problem, and obviously, in what I just described, it will fuel the corruption. Now, you and I have had this conversation before related to Rwanda, and Rwanda today, and I'm not talking about politics, and I'm not talking about the president, even though we all know that he's somebody who basically doesn't allow for independent voice to critique him. But as far as conservation is concerned, I will use that example because it's quite a simple way of handling conservation in a way that it works. So I'll just give an example of what Rwanda does at the moment has been doing for a very long time. And the main money and the main tourism revenue for Rwanda is gorillas. So they have a little hill with about 100 gorillas, and that generates millions and millions of dollars. And the way that the country speaks to its people about gorillas is every time there's a gorilla that's born, they celebrate it as a country. They talk about it on the radio, they talk about it on TV. They have special reports about it, and that has been going on for 20 plus years now. So there is a respect now from the population in Rwanda towards their gorilla population, and they love their gorillas because it brings them international limelight in the way that those gorillas are bringing not only revenues, but are making them proud of what the gorillas have become the emblem of the country, so to speak, right? So it's that simple, and it shows that basically there's a political will there, and everything that basically trickles down from that decision, which is a simple decision of talking to your population and reconnecting your population to the gorillas, therefore the wildlife, is tremendous, and it's going very well. And we are talking about a small country. So obviously this could be scaled up in all over Africa.
Yeah, yeah. And then tell us a country where things are not working out as well.
Well, Tanzania is one of those countries. Tanzania is a one-party system, and the way they control everything there is very difficult to access. So we have very little information on the way it's being done. But what I do know is 10 plus years ago, one prominent leader of Tanzania was retiring from politics, and before he was doing that, we know that a lot of elephants were shot in the process, and we could only ask ourselves, why is this happening? And obviously there was corruption involved, and we all think, and we can't really prove it, but the slaughter of elephants that were happening that we couldn't really get a number on, but we could get some reports, on the ground from people who were seeing things that they had never seen before, was directly related to the government.